عن سلمان رضي الله عنه قال قيل له قد علمكم نبيكم صلى الله عليه وسلم كل شيء حتى القراءة فقال أجل لقد نهانا أن نستقبل القبلة بغائط أو بول أو أن نستنجي باليمين أو أن نستنجي بأقل من 3 أحجار أو أن نستنجي برجيع أو بعظم أخرجه مسلم.
نعم. We're still reading the book of Tahara, and part of Tahara and before we make wudu or ghusl is cleaning up after using the restroom. And there are some adab that the Prophet taught us concerning that, and all this falls under the meaning of the ayah in Surah At-Tawbah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Inna Allah yuhibbu at-tawwabin wa yuhibbu al-mutatahhirin. Allah loves those who repent to Him often, and Allah loves those who purify themselves. That purification it covers all types of cleansing, whether it's physically cleansing yourself from najasat, physical impurities, or spiritual cleansing. This hadith that we're reading right now, and we're reading somewhat out of order in this book, was narrated by Salman al-Farisi. Salman al-Farisi is, where is he from? He was unusual among the Sahaba. Where is he from? Iran. Well, it's modern day Iran. They say he's from Asbahan, which is a place in Iran. And he has the story of how he came to the Prophet ﷺ and accepted Islam is a very long story. Ibn Abbas narrated from him that story in an authentic narration. And in brief, what happened was he was a his father was a Magian or a Zoroastrian. And while he was in Persia, Salman saw some Christians worshiping in their church, and he decided to become Christian. And he left his homeland and went to become like a disciple of a bishop. And originally, I think he was first went to a place around Syria. And he ended up traveling to 4 or 5 different places. And after his teacher died, the teacher would send him to someone else for him to be a disciple. And in the end, his last teacher, last Christian teacher, told him that I don't know anyone else I can send you to, but we expect this is the time when there was a prophet who's going to be sent, and he should be from the Arabs, and he should be sent in a land that has a particular description, a land that has date palms in it, and it's between 2 lands that have black rock in them. Salman, when he heard that, he tried to find some way to get to the Arabian Peninsula, and he tried to sell some of his property to a caravan of Arabs that was going to the Arabian Peninsula. They ended up tricking him, and they sold him into slavery to some Jews. He ended up, however, in the city. He was being sold to one Jew, sold him to another Jew. He was eventually sold to a Jew from Banu Qurayza. And he said, when I got to the Medina, I recognized the description that my teacher had given me. And so he was enslaved for a number of years. And then he said, one day I heard my owner coming, talking to a friend of his. And Salman hadn't heard anything about the Prophet ﷺ, what was happening in Mecca. He was a slave. He didn't get out and wasn't involved in public affairs. His owner came, and his owner started cursing Banu Qayla. Who are Banu Qayla? No. Well, his owner is Jewish. Who would he be? Banu Qayla are Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj. And they're brother tribes. Their mother was a woman named Qayla. So their nickname, those 2 tribes, Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj, is Banu Qayla. So this Jewish man started cursing Banu Qayla and saying there's a man now in Quba, the Masjid of Quba, and they all gathered around him and they believe that he's their prophet. So Salman, when he heard that, he was so excited that he fell out of the tree, and he was gathering dates for his owner in a tree. And his owner scolded him. He asked his owner, "What did you just say?" His owner said, "It's none of your business. Why are you shouldn't. It's none of your concern." He ended up going to the Prophet ﷺ, and his teacher had taught him their specific signs. And he ended up going to the Prophet ﷺ and looking for these particular signs, and he saw them. He accepted Islam, but because he was still a slave, and he wasn't able to leave his master and join the Prophet ﷺ for a number of years. He wasn't able to participate in the Battle of Badr or the Battle of Uhud. After the Battle of Uhud, the Prophet ﷺ had some of the Sahaba get together and buy his freedom for him. So alhamdulillah, they bought his freedom, and Salman, according to the Sirah, he was the one in the Battle of the Ahzab. What did he do?
Told them how to dig the trench.
No. According to the Sirah, he was the one who gave them the idea of Hafr al-Khandaq, digging the trench, which was a novel thing to the Arabs. They weren't expecting that. Now, Salman, this hadith, radiallahu anhu, a person asked him, and we're not told in the narration exactly who this person was, but obviously the person wasn't Muslim. So the person said to Salman, "Allamakum nabiyyukum kulla shay'in hatta al-khira'a," which means this person said to him, "Did your Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he taught you everything, including how to go to the bathroom?" Salman, he responded to him and he said, "Certainly." He taught, and then Salman, he mentioned to him 4 different things that the Prophet ﷺ taught them, different etiquettes about going to the bathroom. He said, لَقَدْ نَهَانَا أَن نَسْتَقْبِلَ الْقِبْلَةَ بِغَائِطٍ أَوْ بَوْلٍ. He, the Prophet ﷺ, forbade us, this is one thing, he forbade us to face the Qibla while defecating or urinating. أَوْ أَن نَسْتَنْجِيَ بِالْيَمِينِ. And he forbade us from wiping ourselves with our right hand. And أَوْ أَن نَسْتَنْجِيَ بِأَقَلَّ مِنْ ثَلَاثَةِ أَحْجَارٍ. And he forbade us from wiping ourselves with fewer than 3 rocks. أَوْ أَن نَسْتَنْجِيَ بِرَجِيعٍ أَوْ عَظْمٍ. And he forbade us from using dung or bone to wipe ourselves with. Now, so these are 4 etiquettes in this hadith. The Prophet ﷺ forbade them from facing the Qibla. He forbade them from cleaning themselves. He forbade us from cleaning ourselves with our right hands. He forbade us from using fewer than 3 stones, and he forbade us from cleaning ourselves with dung or bone. The first etiquette, that is, that we're not to face the Qibla, and in the hadith, inshallah, we'll read in a minute. The Prophet ﷺ also forbid turning our backs toward the Qibla. We're forbidden from facing the Qibla while using the bathroom, because the Qibla is where we face during our salah, and it's a direction that should be honored and respected. And part of the honor it's due to the Qibla is not to face the Qibla while in that state, the state of a person relieving themselves. The second etiquette that he mentioned was that the Prophet ﷺ forbade us from cleaning ourselves with our right hand. And that's because the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is that the right hand is for good things, and the left hand is for things that are dirty. The right hand is for greeting, for shaking someone's hand, for giving, taking, for eating, and in good things like getting dressed, or when combing his hair, or even in wudu, the Prophet ﷺ liked to begin with the right side. So the right side is honored, and the left side is reserved for things that are not clean. Now, the third etiquette was that the Prophet ﷺ forbade us from using fewer than 3 stones. And this is a type of cleansing they call there's istinja and istijmar. Istinja, istijmar. And there are 2 ways of a person cleaning himself after relieving or answering the call of nature. One, istinja, is using water. That's not what he's talking about right here. Istijmar, literally istijmar is using a rock. But it means anything solid. It can be a rock, it can be a piece of wood, or it can be a piece of paper, other than the things that the Prophet ﷺ forbade in this hadith. Obviously, at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they didn't have any paper. So the most common thing that they would use would be a rock. And the Prophet ﷺ forbade them from using, if they clean themselves that way without water, he forbade them from using fewer than 3 rocks. And the minimum is 3. And in another hadith we'll probably read later, the Prophet ﷺ forbade them and told us, and when you make istijmar, to use use an odd number. So if fewer than 3, we're forbidden. The Prophet ﷺ told us not to do it fewer than 3 times, not to wipe fewer than 3 times. If we go over 3, we should stop at an odd number. So if we do 4, then we add 1 more to make it odd. Or if you do 6, we add 1 more to make it 7, an odd number. Now, and the final etiquette that the Prophet ﷺ taught us in this hadith, Salman said that the Prophet ﷺ forbade us from using dung or a piece of bone to wipe ourselves. It might sound strange to us, but in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, you have to keep in mind that there's no sewage system, and there aren't even any necessarily specified toilets. And even the people from the Bedouins who didn't live in the cities, they didn't really understand that there's a special place where you use the bathroom, and that's different from every other place. You understand that from the hadith of the Bedouin who came into the masjid and started relieving himself in the masjid. And the Sahaba got very upset about that. But the Prophet ﷺ, the hadith is, and we'll probably read it later. The Prophet ﷺ told them to calm down and then wave his hands. Then he taught the man that they shouldn't do that in the masjid, and he told the Sahaba to pour water over what he done. The point is that the man was a Bedouin, so for people who live in or nomads, the world is a bathroom to them. There's no, they wherever they are, there's no special place, because they don't even really have permanent houses. They just go from place to place. So when you clean yourself, you have to use whatever you can find, and the person may find like a dried dung or a piece of bone. So the Prophet ﷺ forbade us from those 2 things. The reason behind these 2 things in particular, as far as dung is concerned, it could be najas in and of itself, depending on the animal that it's from. It could be najas in and of itself. So if you use that to clean yourself, you're not cleaning yourself, you're making yourself more dirty. Also, the Prophet ﷺ said that if it's not najas, the Prophet ﷺ said that the dung and bone, the dung is food for the animals of the jinn, and the bones are food for the jinn. So out of respect to our brothers from the jinn, we don't use these things to clean ourselves with. No.
عن أبي أيوب رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: إذا أتيتم الغائط فلا تستقبلوا القبلة ولا تستدبروها ببول ولا غائط ولكن شرقوا أو غربوا. قال أبو أيوب فقدمنا الشام فوجدنا مراحيض قد بنيت قبل القبلة فننحرف عنها ونستغفر الله. أخرجه البخاري ومسلم.
This hadith is narrated by Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, radiyallahu anhu. Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, obviously one of the Ansar, specifically from the tribe of Al-Khazraj, and more specifically from the family of, which family? Banu Najjar. What's special about that family?
The mother of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Not the mother of the Prophet sallallahu
alaihi wasallam.
It was
النبي
Hashim. Hashim, the grandfather of the Prophet ﷺ, was married to a woman from Banu Najjar. And no, they had Abdul Muttalib. And that's why Hashim died. The Prophet ﷺ, Muhammad ibn Abdullah Abdul Muttalib ibn Hashim. Hashim married a woman from Banu Najjar in Medina, and Abdul Muttalib, the grandfather of the Prophet ﷺ, Abdul Muttalib, his real name was, what was his real name? Yes, Shayba. He was born in Medina. Hashim died in Medina, and Al-Muttalib, who was Hashim's brother, came back, brought Shayba back to Mecca. When they saw him bringing back this child, whose name was Shayba, they assumed that he had bought a slave. So they called him Abdul Muttalib. That's how that name came to be. Now, the point is that the mother of Abdul Muttalib was from Banu Najjar. So that they were related to the Prophet ﷺ. They took in honor in being the maternal uncles of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, the akhwat. Also, Abu Ayyub specifically, he was the one that the Prophet ﷺ stayed with until his house and the masjid were built after he made the hijrah. Abu Ayyub, after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Ayyub was always in the Muslim army. And Abu Ayyub ended up dying where?
Iran, I think, close.
Not Iran.
Yeah.
Istanbul. There's a place in Istanbul that supposedly is the grave of Abu Ayyub. Along with that's the exact spot, but it's known that he died in Istanbul, which was known back then as Constantinople. Now, Abu Ayyub in this hadith said, and here Salman was paraphrasing the Prophet ﷺ. He was saying the Prophet ﷺ forbade us from these 4 things. Abu Ayyub is quoting the Prophet ﷺ. Abu Ayyub said that the Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا أَتَيْتُمُ الْغَائِطِ فَلَا تَسْتَقْبِلُوا الْقِبْلَةَ وَلَا تَسْتَدْبِرُوهَا بِبَوْلٍ وَلَا غَائِطٍ وَلَكِنْ شَرِّقُوا أَوْ غَرِّبُوا. Abu Ayyub said that the Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا أَتَيْتُمُ الْغَائِطِ, when you go to the bathroom or you go to relieve yourself, فَلَا تَسْتَقْبِلُوا الْقِبْلَةَ وَلَا تَسْتَدْبِرُوهَا بِبَوْلٍ وَلَا غَائِطٍ. Don't face the Qibla and don't turn your backs to the Qibla, whether it's urine or defecation. Don't face the Qibla or turn your backs to the Qibla while using the bathroom, no matter what it is. Abu Ayyub, and this is again confirmation of or corroboration of what Salman mentioned in the previous hadith, that the Prophet ﷺ forbade us from facing the Qibla while using the bathroom. Although Abu Ayyub added something which is
لما أتينا الشام.
شرقوها وغربوها.
لا أتينا الشام.
No, even in the words of the Prophet al-istidbar. Abu Ayyub mentioned the Prophet also forbade us from turning our backs to the Qibla. That's not what Abu Salman did mention that detail. Abu Ayyub also mentioned that the Prophet said, Sharriku aw gharribu. Sharriku aw gharribu, meaning face to the east or face to the west. Right now, if we face to the east, that means that we're basically facing the Qibla. Why would the Prophet say that?
Yeah, because the direction of Mecca for them, depending on the geography.
Because when the Prophet was in Medina, where is Mecca from in Medina? The south. And so if you're facing the south or turning your back to the south, then you're facing the Qibla, turning your back. But if you turn to the Prophet said, turn completely away to face the east or face the west. Similarly, the Prophet said, ما بين المشرق والمغرب قبلة. ما بين المشرق والمغرب قبلة. What is between the east and the west is Qibla. That means for the people of Medina, as long as you're not facing east, or as long as you're not facing west, you're facing the Qibla. You don't worry about being in an exact line. As long as you're facing in the direction of Mecca, you're facing the Qibla. As long as you're not turned to the east or turned all the way to the west, you're facing, and that's Qibla. And that the Prophet ﷺ was talking to the people in Medina, but the same meaning applies to anyone. As long as you're not facing the total opposite direction to the Qibla, and you're facing Qibla, you don't have to make sure that you're in an exact line from where you are to the Kaaba. Now, Abu Ayyub said, and Abu Ayyub was with the Muslim army almost every year of his life after the Prophet ﷺ. And he said that we went to Ash-Sham, where the area where Syria, Palestine, Lebanon is nowadays. He said we came to some buildings and we found that they were built. There were some toilets already built facing towards the Qibla. So Abu Ayyub said that we would, when we used them, we would sit at an angle. We would sit at an angle and we would ask Allah to forgive us. Now, so this hadith is a reinforcement of the meaning in the previous hadith. And that hadith, Abu Ayyub, it's clear that he understood that the prohibition was in general, whether you're outside or inside. Because he said when they were in Syria, they found these built toilets in the parts of the buildings, and they still, didn't face the Qibla. They made a point of turning aside. Now,
عن واسع بن حبان قال كنت أصلي في المسجد وعبد الله بن عمر مستند ظهره إلى القبلة فلما قضيت صلاتي انصرفت إليه من شق فقال عبد الله يقول أناس إذا قعدت للحاجة فلا تقعد مستقبل القبلة ولا بيت المقدس. قال عبد الله ولقد رقيت على ظهر بيت فرأيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قاعدا على لبنتين مستقبلا بيت المقدس لحاجته. أخرجه البخاري ومسلم.
This hadith is narrated by one of the generation after this Sahaba, one of the Tabi'in named Wasi' ibn Habban. And he said, I was making salah. This hadith it's not just a quote from the Prophet. There's a little story that led up to the Sahabi and making the quote from the Prophet. This man, Wasi' ibn Habban, said, I was making salah in the masjid. And understood that he means the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, the masjid in Medina. And Abdullah ibn Umar, we talked about Abdullah ibn Umar last week, the son of Umar ibn Khattab, was sitting in the masjid, and he was sitting with his back to the Qibla. This man, Wasi' ibn Habban, said, I came to him afterwards, and I sat at an angle. And it's as if Ibn Umar understood that Wasi' here, he was trying not to turn his back to the Qibla. And that's what led him to narrate the incident that he narrated. He said, Abdullah ibn Umar said, يقول أناس إذا قعدت للحاجة فلا تقعد مستقبل القبلة ولا بيت المقدس. Abdullah ibn Umar said, there are some people who say, when you relieve yourself, don't sit facing the Qibla or facing Jerusalem. We didn't read anything about facing Jerusalem directly, but if in Medina, if your back is to the Qibla, you're facing Jerusalem and you're facing the north. And there we have two Sahaba who narrate this from the Prophet ﷺ. Why is Ibn Umar saying, some people say, why is he talking like that? There were two Sahaba narrated from the Prophet ﷺ. Why would he be talking in that kind of dismissive manner? If he said some people say, I mean, according to Abu Ayyub, it was the Prophet ﷺ who said it. Ibn Umar didn't hear it from the Prophet ﷺ directly, and he may not have heard it from after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. Some of the Sahaba moved to different places. He may not have heard it directly even from another Sahabi. It just reached him that some people were saying that. He didn't hear the Prophet ﷺ say it directly, and he didn't hear, obviously he didn't hear any one of the other Sahaba quote the Prophet ﷺ saying it. So since he was very close to the Prophet ﷺ, and he spent a lot of time observing the Prophet ﷺ and listening to the Prophet ﷺ, he, I said, I have some, first-hand information that leads me to question that. He said, and what he said isn't a quote from the Prophet ﷺ. He said, one day I climbed up to the top of a house. The house he's talking about, in another narration, he specified whose house it was. Whose house do you think it would be? Well, the Prophet ﷺ had many different rooms or houses. So Hafsa. Why would he be in Hafsa's house?
Sister.
Because she's his sister. He said, I climbed up once, and I don't know exactly why he was climbing to the top of the house, but he climbed up to the top of the house, and he said, I saw the Prophet ﷺ relieving himself, and he said he was like sitting on between two bricks, like a makeshift toilet. And he said his back, he was facing Jerusalem, facing a Sham, and his back was toward the Qibla. Apparently, Ibn Umar, because of what he saw, he held that there was nothing wrong with facing the Qibla or turning your back to the Qibla at all. You understand from what he said. Yeah. He said, some people say this, but I saw the Prophet ﷺ doing this. Obviously, Ibn Umar didn't hear the Prophet ﷺ forbid, and he didn't hear the other Sahaba quote the Prophet ﷺ saying that. Scholars have struggled to reconcile between what Ibn Umar narrated and what the other Sahaba narrated. Some scholars say that what Ibn Umar narrated applies when you're within walls, you're inside a building. But what Salman and Abu Ayyub narrated, that would apply if you're outside of a building, if you're in the desert. And it was common for people to leave themselves in open areas. Some scholars say that this was specific to the Prophet ﷺ. It was an exception only given to the Prophet ﷺ. Some scholars say that the action of the Prophet ﷺ here, it means that it's makruh. It's not haram, it's makruh. That's a general rule among scholars is if the Prophet ﷺ tells us to do something but then he doesn't do it, or he tells us not to do something but then he did it sometimes, that would indicate that the thing he told us to do is not obligatory, it's recommended. The thing he told us not to do is not haram, it's makruh. It's advisable to stay away from. There are issues with all of these opinions, and the issue here that makes us hesitant to, in normal situations that we would say, okay, it's makruh, or that it's specific to when you're in the buildings, and sometimes they say that the Prophet ﷺ may have intentionally done a particular action to teach the people that it's not haram, or he may have not done something to teach the people that it's not obligatory. But this particular situation here, the Prophet ﷺ didn't intend for Ibn Umar to see him. As far as we know, the Prophet ﷺ said to some people, don't do this. And Ibn Umar, what he saw, it was by accident. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he forbade us from doing something and then didn't do anything to indicate that it wasn't, that it was just makruh, it wasn't an absolute prohibition. What Ibn Umar saw, it was by accident. And the claim that it was specific to the Prophet ﷺ, that is questionable because sometimes the prophets are given special rulings, but those special rulings, either they have extra responsibilities or they have rulings that are somewhat of an honor to them. Like they say, and the Prophet ﷺ was, tahajjud, qiyamul layl was obligatory for the Prophet ﷺ. And it's not obligatory for the rest of the ummah. It's not conceivable that the Prophet ﷺ would be given a special concession to do something that's sort of disrespectful to the house of Allah. That's not something that Prophet ﷺ would be singled out with. If we had to make a reconciliation between the different ahadith, the best one would be to say that it's makruh. It's makruh. The prohibition is not absolute. However, given the fact that what Ibn Umar saw was an accident, and as far as we know, the Prophet ﷺ didn't know that Ibn Umar had seen that, and the Prophet ﷺ, and there's even a rule in the Usul al-Fiqh that says words of the Prophet ﷺ take precedence over actions. The Prophet ﷺ specifically forbade us from facing the Qibla or turning our backs to the Qibla. So that's what we should adhere to. And as long as we avoid that, we don't have to worry about it being makruh or not being makruh. As far as we know, the Prophet ﷺ forbade us from doing that. It appears that the Prophet ﷺ emphasized it because we have two different Sahaba narrating the same thing, that the Prophet ﷺ forbade that. What Ibn Umar narrated, it's possible, we don't know exactly, maybe Ibn Umar misunderstood what he saw, although we don't like to say that about Sahabi in this sense, absolute necessary, but those are possibilities. The words of the Prophet ﷺ, where he forbade us from facing the Qibla or turning our backs to the Qibla, are pretty straightforward and clear. So it's better for us to adhere to that and not do that, and don't turn our backs or face the Qibla, whether we're inside or outside. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. We'll stop with these hadith.